Hi guys, welcome to webinar number 23. This is about avoiding standard losses. So for this, we're just going to look at one hand, which has generated some discussion in the forum. It was posted by FCP Prospect, and it's a hand that he found, I guess, in a Polish site's forum, or I think it was a forum. But anyway, someone posted this hand, and they wanted to have a discussion about it. So I think this is a good hand for this webinar. So when we're talking about avoiding standard losses, there's a lot of things that we can talk about, like standard plays that happen in thousands of games that you play. But by purposely avoiding them, you might be able to save yourself some losses, which in turn can be exchanged for victories. So I think it's really important to avoid some spots in order to get some wins in the end. So in this hand, basically, you can also view it here. Here's the link if you want. Lil Big Kahuna is the shover, and as you guys all know, he's like the best. When he shoves here, just what's your first reaction when looking at this hand, even before we go into detail? What's your just gut instinct? Okay, we got an easy fold. We get a fold. Anybody else? A snap fold, a fold, an LOL. Anybody want to call here? Okay. Tim brings up a good point. Depends on what game it is. I think that's really, really important. What if this was an MTT where there were 10,000 people, and at this point in the game there's 8,000 people left? Yeah, call starts looking a lot better. See, nowhere from this image can we detect stage of game. What happens is we're just interpreting this as a 180 because obviously most of us play 180s. We know Lil Big Kahuna plays 180s. Oh, that's interesting. Pedro says it doesn't make a difference. So to you, I guess if this is a 180, there must be like 80 people left or something. So if this is 80 people left in a 180, this is the same thing as 8,000 people left in a huge tournament. Right, it is far away from the money. Tim says his range could be different in games. Because of the anti-change. So you're saying that Little Big Kahuna will have the same range every single time here based on his stack size? So I think stage of game is kind of important, even if his range is exactly the same. Let's just pretend. Maybe it is for all we know. I think stage of game is still really important because think about when there's 80 people left in a 180, you're going to cash some amount of the time, like whatever that percentage is, like 14, 15, 13, somewhere around there is like a normal percentage cash. But if you're 8,000 people left, you're going to cash like less than 1% of the time. And a lot of those caches aren't even going to be significant. You can treat them as the same thing, but I think it's really important to just be aware of your surroundings. I've said it before in coaching sessions, like if I'm here in America. I could probably talk to someone anytime I need something, right? 'Cause most people are going to speak English. But if I was just in a random place like Tokyo, like my surroundings are way different, so it's going the overall experience of everything is going to be different. But technically, I'm still me, and I'm still in a place, but my surroundings are different. I think Tim had a good point about this being a $3 rebuy. And a $3 rebuy, you have to go way further in terms of collecting chips. Therefore, your call becomes better. Because if you have 4,000 chips in a non-rebuy 180, you're at a different stage of game than you are if this is a $3 rebuy 180. I think this is just a normal, like a 15 maybe. I think buy-in is important too, because if you normally play 15s and then this is a $2 game, then it's of less importance to you. You know, or if you always play 2s and then this is your 115 that you throw in to get practice, this becomes way more important to you. Even though the EV would be identical in both games. Because chip EV doesn't detect buy-ins in real life money. It just does chips and stuff. Someone's talking back. So anyway, I wanted to break down some stuff about this hand to just show you like math and stuff like that. Technically, there is 6,000 in the pot. Sorry, 10,000 in the pot. No, I definitely can't count 6,000. It's his 5,000 he's shoving. The 200 small blind, the 400 big blind, and the 400 in the pot from antes. So 6,000 in the pot, and you have to call your 4,000. So basically, you're 1.5 to 1 odds here. What percentage is that? So what percentage would you have to be if you were 1.5 to 1? Good. What do you mean by pot is smaller? $5,300. How do you get 5,300? So I'm seeing his 5,000, 200, 400, 400. I'm confused. 700 isn't for us if he gets... Oh, I see what you mean. Yes. Yes, you are right. Yeah. See? Made a mistake. So basically, you're not calling 4,000 to win the 6,000. I guess we're calling 4,000 to win. So how much is it? 5.3, because we don't get that extra 700. What about the 200 already being included in the pot? Because you are calling 4, so it's 4 to win 53. Okay. Then we can scratch all that stuff that I did there. Maybe we could keep it and we can compare the two. Okay. So then we'll do this again. So I guess before we get into the other stuff, which is already there, we can just do both sides of this. So maybe this will be good. Work this out with me here. So instead of 6,000 that you're going for 5,300, you said? So 5,300 times, and then what I did up here, good transition, thank you. is different odds versus different ranges. So if King 10 is 40% versus a range, here's a range that lets you be 40% with King 10. Here's a range that lets you be 44%. And here's a range that lets you be 48%. So just check those out really quick and just kind of look at those. And in the meantime, we will do this. Anybody want to do the math on that? Oh, and then this should be the same still. What's that loud sound in the background? Someone's mic on? Here. Is anyone doing the math, or should I just do this? Here, 5,300 times 0.4, 2120. 5,300 times 0.44 is 2332. And 5,300 times 2544. There we go. Okay. So now what we can do is we'll do 21 minus that, 2,300 minus that, and 2,500 minus that. Any questions on this at all for anybody? Can someone do these subtraction things in a calculator while I type them? Thank you, thank you. Is this negative 280, right? This is like plus 92 or something. And that's, what is that? 25. 464. Perfect. Nice. Okay. So basically, now since we're going for a 5,300 pot, thanks guys, these are your totals. So basically, if a 48% favorite plus one big blind. So if we proposed that to you, and we made you an offer, we said, if you call here, you will earn 464 chips, which is about one big blind. And everything about the range, we already know what his range is exactly. It's this plus King 9, Queen 9, Jack 9. And you know it's worth 464 chips. You know that's somewhere around, I don't know, 10-ish% increase to your stack. Does anybody call now? Jesse, is your mic on?
Is it now?
There's some like loud noise in the background. It is now.
Okay.
I think someone's mic is on because I can hear like the fuzz and everything. There we go. That decreased it a lot. So does anybody call now? Anybody? Or do you still fold? So we get one call. Ooh, we've persuaded someone to call. We get a still call. Anybody still fold? Morton still folds. Oh, he folds, I guess. So not a fold, it's a fold, I guess. So does that mean you're being persuaded a little bit, maybe? So now you know that it's worth 464. Anybody else? Pedro, do you still fold? Yes, Puyan, we have excluded Jacks Plus from his range. So his range is going to be, for this at least, 2s through 10s, Ace 5 suited plus, King 9 suited plus, all of those. And then also King 9, Queen 9, Jack 9. Okay, so we still get a fold. Leon says, one thing that no one has considered is the future benefits of calling wide in future games versus him. True, which would have much more of an effect if this was a 9-man where you come across him all the time and you probably have him in like 20 other games as this hand comes up. It would also require him knowing who you are and recognizing you, and it would also include coming across him again later and at a meaningful spot in the game and having you guys actually be in a hand against each other. So Pedro says his image against him is bad anyway. He doesn't need to call here for him to know that I call him with ATC a lot. Okay. You could also type to someone in the chat box, say, I'll call you wide. I guess that could be the same thing without calling. Then you can avoid the hand, but then still get your point across. Okay. So maybe he can make a note against you in a jest. Anybody else? Morton says these calls increase variance. Casper says, I wouldn't call because I wouldn't exclude jacks, etc. But given one big blind, I call. Well, yeah. Now, if you give him jacks plus, then obviously you're going to do a little worse. But for this example, we'll just pretend that you know the facts. You know that he's exactly on those cards. And you know that you're exactly 464 chips of expected value in the positive. And given these things, it's like we're presenting you an offer. Do you accept the offer or do you deny the offer? Morton says if it's a 2 or an 8, lots of better spots to come. Okay. How about I try and make the offer a little better? Let's use the example before when I was interpreting it wrong and thought it was 6,000 chips instead of 53. So let's pretend that for some reason PokerStars gives you a 700 chip bonus for this hand. They're trying to sweeten the offer. They're like, oh, you don't like the first offer I present to you? Well, let me try and make it a little more special for you. So what if instead 6,000 chips? And here's the math with that. You would earn a little bit more overall because there's more reward in the pot. The risk is still the same. And here's the end totals for this. So here's if you win with those percentages. Here's if you lose with those percentages. So these were the same. The losses are the same. Well, because we're just throwing in 700 chips. We're not increasing your stack. The wins are different because there's more reward. Here's the new totals. If you're 40%, you will break even on the nose. If you're 44%, you'll make 1 big blind. If you're 48%, you will make 2 big blinds. Now what do you guys think? Good comment. Good comment. Okay, so now we get a snap call. Which one? For the plus 800 chips one is a snap call? So like here, how about this? You know how they have in Sit and Go Wiz, they have edges and stuff? In this hand, clarify what edge, like chip-wise, makes you want to call. Like where's your personal threshold for calling and where's your personal threshold for snap calling? Like if you got to decide where that threshold is, like what is yours? Apparently 800 to Casper is like a oh my god call. Because he just can't say no to it. It's too good. So 400 is a call for you because it's like 1 big blind, which is good. Setting a minimum edge thing to 1 big blind is actually kind of a cool thing because it gives you something worthwhile. 1 big blind is decent. Puyon, what's your personal thing? Jesse says, well, cash or big MTT, anything. Well, why? So if I offer you a penny, if I say, hey, I will give you a free plane trip to my house from Ohio, you'll get here. And when you're here, I'm going to give you $1, but then you just got to leave and fly back. I'll pay for your plane and everything. Do you do it? Yeah. So you're that desperate for a dollar that you would waste like 24 hours of your life to fly here and back because it's plus EV? Oh, well, I guess if you need a dollar that bad, you could probably ask someone for a dollar on the street and save time and get the same amount of value. Let's say that, yeah, because there's risk, and it's really interesting you say something silly like that, right? But I mean, with any type of reward, there's always risk. I mean, that's the whole premise of risk versus reward. And in poker, it kind of gets overlooked. A lot of a lot of things are just, oh, there's a reward. Oh my God, I'll do it. But it's like, whoa, whoa, bro, what about the risks? And it's always important to balance those things. And expected value, like mathematically, it doesn't really take that into effect. It looks at your risks in terms of chips you lose, but it doesn't look at risks that fall outside the mathematical stuff. They're like, oh, you're going to lose 1,000 chips, but then that's all it sees as consequence. It doesn't see other consequences. Like, is this a waste of time? You know, can you, if you didn't focus on these things, could you load other games instead and then have more reward? You know, things like that. And you could list tons. Not worth a dollar for that. So anyway, who wants to call now? If I told you that this is his range, you know you're 48% to win, you know it's plus 800 chips, who calls, who folds now? So we get a still call for the third time, of course, which would make sense. Does anybody who said fold before want to call now? We get a I'm not sure. Puyan, tell me. What do you think? So Jesse says, I think we talked about this before, but your threshold or whatever we called it also leaves you room for mistakes. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the whole thing is here is not to go off of what Wiz says, because Wiz is just saying, is calling greater than 0 chips, therefore it's plus EV, but you want to have some type of personal edge. Huyan, you suck. The question was, now that you know it's plus 800 chips, if you're a 48% favorite, now do you call? Or do you still fold? That is the question. So Jesse calls, knowing it's 800 chips. Okay. So we've turned one fold into a call. Morton asks, what is a good personal edge? It's easy to just set to one big blind, but is it good? Exactly. That's the whole thing. It's like, what edge do you set it at? And all the time, like, people would ask me, like, oh, what edge do you set it at? And sit and go, Wiz, like 0.5? I heard that's good because I heard it on a forum. Like, but it shouldn't really be like that. It should be like, what's an edge to you? Like, what do you like? Like, in real life, you're allowed to say no to stuff, right? Like, why do you have to do something just because it's worth more than 0? You're allowed to say no. And you have to have some type of personal threshold where you say, okay, I know that this is above 0, but I still want to say no to it. Because if you don't say no, then you have to fly out to my house from Ohio just to get a dollar and fly back. Puyan adds, and then you can see if future benefits outweigh the EV-ness of the situation. This is a good point Jesse makes. The more confident you are with reads, the less you need, or less edge you need. Blinds matter, that's true. Get them out of here, please. So that's interesting. Morton says he would judge his edge by 15% of his stack, which is about 600 chips. So his edge here would be 600 chips. So that's a cool way of looking at it. I think that's actually a great way to set a chip EV edge. Say like, okay, what percentage of my stack do I like? There's your edge. Jesse says, if I was 100% sure, sometimes I take an edge a lot closer to 0, where if I'm unsure, maybe 8%, then I want a little bit bigger of an edge. So in our session yesterday, we were talking about shoving with 8s with 12 normal big blinds isn't good, and now calling with king 10 with 10 is something that confuses you. Okay, yeah. In our session yesterday, me and Wicked Souls, we were looking at a hand with pocket 8s where he wanted to shove 15 big blinds. And I was telling him that maybe you could shove 12. The big difference is that when you shove, you have folding equity, and when you're calling, you don't. Yeah, here's just showdown value. I mean, this is the exact same thing as if you shoved king 10. Well, actually, no, it's not. If you shoved king 10 and you knew that the small blind was going to call you with these exact hands, you'd still be 48%, but at least now you have folding equity to go with it. And there's a lot of hands, tons of hands I've done math on in the past where when you get, like, if you were the shover, when you get called, you lose money, but then the folding equity is what brings it above 0. So Wicked Soul says it's better to shove king 10 than to call with it with this stack. Right, it's always better to shove because you have that folding equity. So, for example, if let's just say the showdown equity of this hand is the 464 chips, like we said before, but if now you were the shover and you also had 50% folding equity, then you would pick up the pot 50% of the time. So your folding equity, there would be 1,000 in the pot pre-flop. You would add an extra 500 chips to that, which would boost you to 964. Unless you know he shoves 3 deuce. 3 deuce. But then if you did, then it would totally morph your odds. You'd probably be like a 65% favorite or something like that. And at 48%, notice the pattern here. Like, if you were 40%, it was 0. If you were 44, you're 400. 48 is 800. So maybe there's a pattern. If you're 52%, you're 1,200. If you're 56%, you're 16. If you're 60%, maybe it's 2,000. I'm not sure if that's accurate. It probably drops some. But. Well, I think what Wicked Souls is mentioning here is there was a hand, and I think we actually talked about in the last webinar, where it was basically it was 3-handed in a 180. Blinds were 2K, 4K. A player in the small blind shoved 60K, and he thought he was shoving ATC. So he called in big blind with king 9. But the stacks were 60K small blind, 100K big blind. And I think that was in the last webinar. But the difference was stage of game and stack sizes, right? So, like, he's right on the nose with this. Stage of game, like, because you're going to do tons and tons of different things 3-handed and play hands much more frequently than you will here when there's like 80, 100 people left. It makes a huge difference. That's why you always have to be aware of your surroundings. And there is ICM too, right? But forget ICM for a moment. Just think logically about it. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head here. You're just like, dude, it's stage of game. Like, there's more to lose 3-handed than there is now, which means you should call tighter 3-handed in. But then it also depends on the situation. I mean, there's a poker book I read a long time ago that David Sklansky wrote. And the very first thing he said was, in everything in poker, for every question, the answer is, it depends. And if that's confusing, then start thinking about that. Because it depends is the answer to pretty much everything. Because every situation is unique. And so a mistake that is very common that players will make is trying to generalize all situations and to see them as the same. So then it's like you can learn types of situations in groups. But the thing is every situation is different, but there's an illusion that a lot of things are similar because they happen a lot. But if you can find the unique special thing inside of each hand, then you can really grow as a player. Does anybody still want to fold if it's worth 800, or is everybody calling? Team viewers still working today? Yes. Anybody want to fold? We get a don't know because it's your 15% minimum edge. It's crossed your threshold. We've made you a deal. I'm like, hey, I'm going to offer you some amount of money. And you go, oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. But eventually I can hit the point. What is that expression? That every person has their price, basically, for whatever. Maybe not for everything, but a lot of times you have the price. Like, if you, like, I dare you to do something that you really, really don't want to do. I could probably get you to do it if I paid you enough money. You know, of course, if it was something appropriate, you know. Like, what if you're scared of heights, right? I dare you to go bungee jumping. You'd probably say, heck no, but eventually there's probably a price that could get you to do it. That's your personal threshold. Good point, Spoon. $1. Like, I want you to take a baseball bat and smash your car's windshield. How much money? For me, I would do, what's the price of repairing the windshield, and then enough money so I could have leftover so I can do something cool with it. Things like that. But then translate that and convert it to poker situations. What's your personal edge? So anyway, so Wicked Souls thought that I was getting at the point that I think you should call here with 800. I'm actually unsure what I would do here. I think most of the time I still fold, even if someone presented this offer to me. But here's why, and you can choose to agree with this or disagree with it, and think what you like. I just want to give you some information to think about here. So basically, one thing to add here is that I guess in terms of Chippy V, you would have to take away the ante, because by folding you do lose 25, I suppose, but not a big difference. So really by 800, it's plus 775, but whatever. Okay, so basically, if you're 44%, you'll win a big blind. In this exact hand, you'll only win 92 chips, because I did the math wrong in the beginning. 464 chips, or you could think about it as 400 and 800, any way you'd like. But now, here's the next thing, because like before, we were talking about what are the consequences if Jesse flew on an airplane to come get that dollar from me. He'd probably lose a day where he could have done something with his life, right? So you always got to think of real life consequences, not just mathematical consequences, okay? One second. I suppose, if you know he has a particular hand, though. Here we don't. We just know we're 48% versus range of ace-king would do better, I suppose. But anyway, so you want to think about real-life consequences. So here's now the thing that I'm going to throw in with the deal, this offer that I'm making you. There's the exception that if you call here and say you will win 800 chips or you will win 464, you will be out of the game 52% of the time. You're a 48% favorite, so it must mean that you're going to be out. For your Canadians, you'll be out 52% of the time. So now we've turned Morton. He started with a fold, then we turned it into a fold, I guess. Then we turned him into a call. Then we turned him into a fold again. Because it's this offer. You have to consider all the things that go into risk versus reward. In poker, what people miss when they look at risk is thinking of the real life consequences. Well, or maybe we can call it the real game consequences of doing a certain play. Actually, and real life, like actual real life monetary value, that is one thing to think about when you're in, like, maybe you get to a final table of a big MTT and the payout for the next spot is like $5,000, and you would have to think, like, what can you actually do with $5,000? What is that value to you in the country where you live? And start thinking about real life things that are affected by that. But if you throw a hand from a final table in a forum, everybody has different real life values. And so they just look at the EV. But EV can't gauge anything in real life. It just looks at numbers from a game. But anyway, so the exception is you're out 52% of the time. Anybody else change their mind? Or anybody staying the same? Puyon, what about you? So Puyon folds. What about El Burrow was saying he would call every single time. Does that convince you to fold? If I say, by the way, you're out half the time, 1% for each card in the deck, 52% of the time, you're gone. Leon says, I want to be sure when I call wide, which we could translate that into he wants a bigger edge. Because bigger edge equals more sureness, usually. Because obviously ace-king is a bigger edge, and with ace-king, you're more sure. I'm interested in what El Burrow is going to say. I wonder if I can convince him to fold here, or if he still stands by. Zzz. Must be typing something big. Jesse says, I'm still calling, but just for the record, I don't think I've called light here very often. Okay, so then is it something about Lil Big Kahuna being the shover? Maybe El Burrow's not typing. I don't know why it's doing that. Oh, here we go. If I knew for sure he's on ATC or super wide, I'd still call. We need to double up with less than 10 true big blinds. That's really interesting. 10 true blinds or 10 normal blinds? Okay, so you do mean 10 normal, right? Okay, okay. Even if you have, this is what's leading you to call right here a lot. Or maybe not a lot, maybe that's the wrong word, but this is what's convincing you to call. Because you feel threatened when you're under 10. And you shouldn't feel threatened. Here's some advice. Don't feel threatened until you're under 6. Because I've always used, like, normal big blinds to me is, and I've said this before, it's like a health meter, right? So I think when you're 6 and less, that's when health gets damaged. Why am I writing this here? I should put it in notes. Let's do this. Don't feel threatened here until you're under 6. 6 or under, I should say. So like a 2,400 chip stack. And also, another thing too is think about where you are. You're in the best position because you have the most free hands until you're threatened by anything other than the ante. You fold, you have essentially free hands. I guess they cost you 25 chips. But you have time. So that might be leading you to call here if you feel threatened. Click. Right, and good point, Morton. True big blind is only when open shoving, because true big blinds do not measure health. They measure just shoving ranges when you're deciding to open shove or open fold. Now, see, when you say that, when you get under 10 true, like, are you saying, because I think right here the pot was 1,000, so let's just call the blinds 300, 600. So 10 true equals 6,000. So do you feel threatened there? Or do you feel threatened there? 10 true or 10 normal? Interesting. So there you go. So basically, you're interpreting your health through true big blinds, and that's oh, this is very interesting. That's going to cause you to freak out way too soon. They're like, the world's going to end in 100 years, and you're interpreting it as the world's going to end in a year, because you're like jumping the gun, basically. So that's very interesting. Yeah, that's a good question, Morton. Would you call it the 5K stack? Because it technically, you would interpret having 5K as being, what's the word I'm looking for? Like vulnerable or short. This is really good. Yeah, because 5K is like 8 true big blinds. So technically, if that's under 10, then you might interpret that as, oh, I'm in trouble. I need to do something. See, sometimes like when people, like, you know how people say, whoa, leaks, I have these leaks. Or, I mean, a lot of the time they're just buried somewhere in how we interpret stuff. This is a classic example right here. I mean, this is great. Like, we're finding out why he's potentially making a mistake here. Like, this is really, really good to notice this. Okay, well, 5K obviously is better, but so the big mistake you're making is you're using true big blinds to gauge health. Only use normal big blinds for that. And the reason is because, for example, if the true big blind is 600 here, let's pretend you were going to min raise pre-flop. A min raise is not 1200. If it was, then we should always think in true big blinds for everything, but it's not. So yeah, true big blinds is only if you are going to open shove or open fold, and you're just trying to figure out like an adjusted shove range based on antes. Apart from that, everything else is normal big blinds. Even if you were going to raise commit and you were planning on getting all in, you could use true big blinds to think about it because you know that you were going to open shove. But then you could use normal big blinds in thinking about it if you want to. But the true big blinds is basically saying, do I want to open shove, yes or no? And then apart from there, you can do whatever. Because true big blinds is just a way to take the shoving ranges that you already know, but then adjusting them for antes. But if you're not shoving, there's no reason to think about that stuff. I mean, of course, you can think about antes, but not in the way where you adjust true big blinds. Because if, pretend little big kahuna didn't shove here, right? If he were to team viewer just cut out. I'll get you another code. If you were to cut out, sorry, what am I talking about? That's what I just said about team viewer. Okay. If little big kahuna was just coming in for a min raise, he would not min raise to 1200 here. That would be a 3x raise. Therefore, we cannot think about true big blinds in non-shoving situations. Unless, like Morton said, the exception is you know you're raising committing anyway, which is essentially a shove. Yeah, this is big gold for you. Yeah. So basically, we can sum it up by saying normal big blinds is your health meter. And when you're vulnerable or damaged is when you have 6 big blinds and less of that health. Why me told me something that I think is really smart, and we did a coaching session a long time ago, and he was saying he has this idea that 10 big blinds is a life. So translate that into like however you want to think about it, like a video game or something, right? If you have 1 life in a video game, at least you have a full life. But within that life, you can be damaged, right? That's really, really important. And obviously, the more lives you have, 10 big blinds, 20 big blinds, etc., the more healthy you are. But let's say you had 2 big blinds, which is 2 lives, but then your life was half damaged. That would be like having 15 big blinds. At least you have half a life plus a whole life. Yeah. So this is really, really important. Biggest thing, Morton pasted in, normal big blinds is your health meter. So even in a situation where I'm open shoving and I'm thinking in true big blinds to gauge what my shoving range is, I'm still thinking about my health in normal big blinds at all times. Because think about it, if you were playing a video game, they always have the health meter up there. If you're playing one of the like Street Fighter or one of those games, you always have your health meter at the top. even if you're not thinking about it in the moment, it's still there. And you always have to be thinking about your health in poker. Another reason that can contribute to why this is a call or a fold. I had 10 normal big blinds. That's one full life. If we scroll up to the very beginning, oh boy, where did we start? I don't know if I can find this. Pedro said, easy fold, he said. And then he said something about, I don't want to call with 10 big blinds. Oh, how can I find this? Let's see. Oh, I don't know where it is. Maybe one of you guys can find it and then copy paste it. He said something like, I don't want to call this with, can you do it, Puyan? He said, I don't want to call this with 10 big blinds. And that he's interpreting this as he has a full life. And it's a full healthy life. So imagine it like this, okay? This will help. So like here's your one life, right? So here's imagine it like this. Here's your full life. And now think about it like this. I don't know what the middle color would be. I'm trying to spell yellow and not have it go past 6. So what I mean by this, TeamViewer should be up. Here's the code. Is like with blinds 1, 2, and 3, you're basically in the red zone. It's like of this particular life, you're like, oh crap. And then 4, 5, and 6 is like yellow. Can you guys not see? Oh. With that live, what do you mean? Sorry, Casper, I'm not sure what you mean. So this is like 7 and 8 big blinds is like light green, and 9 and 10 is like dark green. And obviously green means good and red means bad, right? So basically you have to think about your life as you get closer to that 10 big blinds, it's healthier and healthier. Normal big blinds, correct. This is your, literally, this is your health meter. I see what you mean. Like, could you interpret it differently? You definitely could interpret it differently. This is just a suggestion. But you would want to kind of maybe interpret it in your own way to something that suits you. I still think 6, basically, is probably the only thing that we should all have in common, where 6 is the point, 6 normal big blinds, is the point where your health takes a big hit. Now, how this relates to the webinar hand is that when you're calling plus EV for 464, plus EV for 800, whatever, you should always gauge your health and be like, okay, I have full health, not to mention you have a bunch of free hands after, therefore does this affect anything? So just to be clear. So anyway, to finish this off, what's important is to understand. Exactly. And you have to gauge it for yourself. Expected value does not consider anything except the current hand. Okay? EV just goes, oh, look at these numbers. Okay, throw them in a calculator. This hand only. It is just numbers that you put into a calculator that yield a result. It is up to you and you alone to interpret the result. All EV is doing is telling you the difference between shoving and folding and that amount, whether it's positive or negative. But it's up to you to take that value and interpret what it actually means for you. What is your personal threshold where there's enough chips to make it worthwhile? A lot of players just think if it's greater than 0, that equals good. And if it's less than 0, that equals bad. But that's not the case at all. There's different levels of good and there's different levels of bad. As in anything in life, really. So this is what you want to think about. can you earn more than the expected value of this call, whether it's 464 or 800, whatever? Can you earn more than that the 50+% of the time you remain in the game? This is what's really important. Because remember, before we posed the risk here, we said, if you call here, you will be out greater than 50% of the time, the 52% and 56% respectively. If you fold here and remain in the game 100% of the time, can you earn more than the amount made just from making this call by itself? Yes? No? You would never know for sure. This is an estimate because it's very hard to put this into numbers. He's thinking yes. See, interesting. He said, well, we can shove from the button, and then, you make, what if you just made 800 chips the next hand by shoving? Less variance because you have loads of folding equity now, whereas in this hand you have 0. But that's what's really important about this. When you call, you put yourself at risk completely, which is why when you call for either all of your stack or a majority of your stack, you have to think about the consequences. It does depend on table. More importantly, I think if you're at a final table, because then you're at a table you know is going to stay that way. Here you could just be rearranged at random, basically. Good point. So basically, can you earn more than this expected value if you're still in the game? This term, remember this for the rest of your poker lives. This is called future expected value. There's expected value in this isolated hand, but in any game, if you were still in it, there is future expected value. If you call and you lose, your future expected value is 0. You're out. You have no room in this particular game to earn any value in the future. If you call and you lose that 52 or 56% of the time, respectively, you can never earn future expected value. If you fold on purpose, you still have loads of future expected value, assuming you're playing well, which all of you guys are. So that's the whole point in this avoiding standard losses. If you have a hand here, maybe it's not king 10. Maybe to you, this isn't a call. To a lot of people, it is. What about if you have king jack, king queen? Maybe that's triggering the bias that you have, because everybody has their default biases where you say, oh, king queen is a call, but king 10 is not. But what if we just pretend king queen, you are still the same exact percentage, the 48%. So instead of being dealt a hand that your bias and default range says is a call, what if we just exchange your cards for a piece of paper that said 48%? And let's pretend it was worth the exact same amount. What expected value doesn't consider is future expected value. And that's really, really, really important. Normal expected value thinks about today. Future expected value thinks about tomorrow. If we only thought about today, you'd probably make a lot of mistakes. You'd forget that you have stuff scheduled for tomorrow, etc. So now the last question I posed to you, think about this on your own time, just whenever. Am I worth more than this call? Any questions, comments, anything? Hard to quantify, exactly. I mean, this is something that, just think about this for a long time, like not just today, tomorrow, a week from now. Start gauging that and incorporate that with stage of game, what type of game, the buy-in of the game, all those things. Quantifying, well, or attempting to quantify risk and reward, but not just numbers. Just think about real life or real game risk and reward. And just think about this like on a deeper level, like, am I worth more than calling here because a forum says I should, or because Sit and Go Wiz says I should? Yes. So that's another thing too. And I'm glad you said that, so we can throw that in. A lot of standard losses come from seeking out good players and trying to make good calls against them to prove your superiority. To be like, I can stand up to you, or I can play with the best, or I'm better than you. Superiority complex. I have to stand up to him because he's good and I have to show him that I'm a man, or something like that. Like, forget about it. This is how you will lose. This is how you destroy any ounce of future expected value that you have from your skill. It's true. There's a lot of people who will try and stand up to good players just to show them who's boss, or to try and just like be a hero. Don't they say that? They're like, in the case of an emergency, don't try and be a hero. And then some people do, and they're successful. But a lot of people don't do it. Don't try and be a hero here. Even if we know it's profitable. So a way that you can avoid standard losses is just not making calls like this, even if you know they're profitable, versus someone who's good, just to kind of show them that you can battle them. And I'll tell you, the biggest downswing I ever had when playing was when I tried this on a consistent basis for 2,400 games. And it was the worst stretch I ever went through, being a hero. So even if this is a spot where you still look at it and go, oh, standard fold. What if it's blind versus blind? Maybe you don't have king 10. Maybe you're wicked souls and you have that king 6 like we talked about. You know, or what if you have queen 5 suited and some really good player shoving 100% shoves? And maybe your bias in that spot is, I have to stand up to him. It's blind versus blind. Or whatever the spot is where you feel the need to try and stand up for yourself against someone. Don't worry about it. Because now you're just falling victim to standard losses that can be avoided. And when you avoid them, you're still in the game, that 50 some odd percent of the time. And with that extra time you're in the game, you can turn that into future value. So you can turn a lot of losses into wins. We did it before in a webinar, but like if you could go back in time and just swap out a lot of these calls that you may make, where there's BVB or in a situation like this, and if you could just fold instead, I guarantee you a very small percentage of the time, you're going to turn those into wins. And of course, it will be a small percentage because it's still a small percentage that you actually win a game, but you turn losses into wins basically, or good cashes, and those add up. If you can go back and do that to 1% of your games over 10,000 games, that's 100 games that you could change around. Say that you lose a bunch of them anyway. Say you lose 80 of those 100 games. So all of a sudden you have 20 cashes, maybe 5 of those are wins. All of a sudden you've made $1,000 more over the long run of 10,000 games just because you avoided a standard loss. Morton says, I think the less players in the format, the better these calls get, because there will be more similar spots. But in a 180 man, it doesn't happen that much. Yeah, and that's why, like, I think going out of the way to be a hero obviously is not the best idea, but the less people in the game, like if it was a 9-man, the slightly better it gets, and the only reason is because you will get to that spot way more often. You know, how often do you get in the money in a 9-man? Like every day of your life, right? How often do you get in the money in a 180 man? Not as often, but still almost every day. But then how often do you actually get a good finish in a 180? Maybe once a day, twice a day, and then on a good day, 5 times a day. But in a 9-man, it can be like 30 times a day that you have a good finish. And also in a 9-man, you come across the same people all the time, just like an 18-man. So then there's kind of a future metagame that gets established against that guy. In a 180, it doesn't really happen too much. So Barrow says, thinking of it, I can think of 3 times in the last few sessions where I've thrown away a 7K stack at big blind 800. Yeah. And before, you were interpreting 7K as very, very damaged. And as we know now from our health meter, that's like what? 8, 9 big blinds? So you're in the green zone. You're safe. Well, not, maybe safe's not the word, but you're comfortable. Good point. Cool. Seems like a good webinar for today. So think about this last question. Am I worth more than this call? Not just this, but in a situation that you're doubting. Oh, maybe we can add one more thing. By the way, if you're not sure of a call, fold. I'll leave it at that. Just take that advice. If you don't know, just fold. And you'll save yourself in a lot of spots automatically. See, like whoever this is who posted this in the forum, in whatever forum it was, it's because they're questioning this spot. Because they're probably trying to do something that's plus EV, like to do the correct play. So if I could give this guy advice, I'd just say, hey, if you took the time to post this in the forum, just don't call. Because you're obviously unsure. And since calling always yields bigger mistakes than shoving because there's zero folding equity when you call, why do something you're unsure of when it has the potential for the biggest mistake? Case end point. So let's add that. If you are unsure, fold. Cool. So now go save some games and turn those into wins. See you guys.